So now that my pool is done, I want to attempt to make this video here that I can share with anyone else that wants to attempt to change out their own pool liner, or if they have a bad pool liner. I'm going to try to share my story of what I went through, and maybe it'll help you make your decision on how you want to handle your situation. So last year when I opened this pool for the first time, because we had just bought the house, it was very wrinkly, the liner was, and pretty much on its last leg. So we went through the summer, but I was constantly losing about a foot of water a week, not realizing how much damage I was actually doing to the pool underneath, to the vermiculite that was under the pool. Well, this winter, when I closed it in the fall, I thought, well, I ought to be all right. But what had happened is the pool had gotten another leak, even lower, and it had drained out. So in December, when we started getting snow, the cover of my pool started sagging. I noticed that it was sagging down a good 3-4 feet. When I looked under the cover, I realized there was no water in the low end of the pool, which is a very bad situation. With the frost that we get here during the year in the winter, the walls could have easily caved in. The frost could have pushed up the bottom of the pool. But I still had 6 foot of water in the deep end. And at that point I just said to myself, what can I do? So I just let it set. And I did some research online, because I called some dealers and tried to get some prices on liners, and nobody wanted to just sell me the liner. They wanted to do the pool, and I was getting prices from anywhere from $4,800 to $6,000 to replace the liner in this pool. And that didn't include repairing what needed to be repaired. It just included minor work. So what I did this spring was I measured out the pool when I got the cover off, which was destroyed, by the way, because it couldn't hold the snow. So I got the cover off the pool and measured out the pool, found a place online that would sell me a liner. And again, that's tricky. If you don't get your measurements right, you're going to put yourself in a spot, because these liners, you can be plus or minus 1.5 inches in your measurements, but there are standard measurements, and somebody that does pools for a living, they know those measurements. And now I know those measurements, but I didn't when I measured it. So I was a carpenter for years, so I'm pretty good with a tape measure, and I measured it pretty well. Ordered the liner a couple weeks ago. I knew that we were going to have a sunny week, so I decided now it's time to do the pool. On a Saturday afternoon, I took the liner out, and there was a lot of damage. I want to stop and recommend anyone that wants to do their liner, don't let your pool drain. If you're going to drain your pool with a pool like this and a vermiculite bottom, you want to drain your pool and replace the liner right away. The water in the pool is what keeps everything together. All the pressure, it keeps the walls where they need to be. It keeps the water from getting underneath the liner in your pool. So once all that water is gone, if you get a rain, all of that water is going to come up from underneath your liner like it did to my pool, and the vermiculite in the lower end was just popped up everywhere. I had to take all the old vermiculite out, and I had gone to the store and I got some light mortar mix, and I retroweled the whole bottom. I didn't make it very thick, but I just leveled everything out. And I had to go and do a lot of work to the sloping side here. As the lower end starts sloping down, I had about probably 3 foot that I had to refloat in that area as well. Not to mention some very large holes on in the deep end on the sloping sides. I had to patch all of those. I was lucky I didn't have a lot more damage than what I had. So we got all that out. I pulled all the old debris out, all the loose stuff out, repatched everything, and then I went to Home Depot and I got some foam underlayment, and I put that on top of the low end of the pool, because I figured that's where everybody's going to be walking all the time. On the deep ends, people aren't going to be walking on that bottom very often, but on the sloping end, yes, definitely. So I put that foam all over, covered the entire sloping end, and then I also went over where the pool starts to, where it starts to slope. I covered it, the low end. Correct myself. I covered the low end with foam, and then I went over the slope about another 3 feet, and I also put foam in the on the walls in the deep end of the pool on the sloping sides. I used a little bit of a self-sticking spray to get it to go there, and I put it down just before I started putting in the liner. So the things that I learned here was, one, if you think you got a leak in your liner and you can't find it, replace your liner. Don't let it set, or it's just going to do a lot of damage. 2, if you're going to do it, you're going to replace your liner and you want to do it on your own, drain your pool and replace the liner. Don't let the pool drain itself. Don't let the water get down behind the liner. Just take a industrial sump pump with a 50 or 100 foot hose, whatever you need. You can either pump it out to the street, or you can, if you have a lot of land, you can pump it out into the trees or something, or out into the field. But do that, pull the liner out, and then replace it right away, and you'll probably have minimal damage. But don't wait until the liner fails to replace it, because that's too late. Now you're doing a lot of damage to your pool. So I got all this in, I started putting the liner in on my own, and then I realized all of these corners have to be in just the right place. So there's arrows behind every corner, and those arrows have to be in the corners. And then there's a line where the pool begins to slope. That line needs to be in its proper place. The other corners on the other side of the pool, in the deep end, those have to be in their proper place. If any of these lines are out of place and you start filling up your pool, the liner will pop out because it's not where it's supposed to be. So that's very critical to make sure that those spots, and it's the other thing I learned, when you put your liner in, make sure it's sun. Make sure you start putting your liner in the morning. You want it to be in the low 70s, 70 degrees or more, and you want that sun beating on the liner, because that's going to loosen it up and that's going to allow it to stretch. Because that's what I had a problem with when I put my liner in. I couldn't get the corners where they needed to be. The other trick was, you want to get some corner bead. So as you, like here, I've done my steps, and then I started working the corners, and that worked all right. But as soon as I got to that deep end over here, and I couldn't get the corners even close, because I started installing it as the sun was going down at the end of the day, because I was anxious to get it in, and I realized that I couldn't get it. By the next morning, because this is a porous bottom, there's a lot of water that came up out of the ground. I had to pull the liner all the way back and then get all of the water out of the pool again, and then I could reinstall the liner. But what I did, just to make sure that everything was right, because I didn't want to pay for this twice, I hired a professional to do the final phases of the pool. They came in that morning, they pulled the liner back, they checked everything that I did, made sure, they did a little bit more a couple more fixes, and then they reinstalled the liner. And that's when I learned about the corner beads. Using those, they just used like a wooden block to tap those corner beads into place, and then that corner doesn't move once it's in. And then of course they did the far corners, and they made sure all the lines were where they're supposed to be. All the corners were exactly where they needed to be. When they had all that right, they stuck a vacuum to it for a little while, and for maybe half an hour. But while the vacuum was still running, they went down and put the cover on the main drain, and then started putting water in the pool with a hose. And that vacuum has to stay running. You put that vacuum between the liner and the pool wall, you tape it up with duct tape and make sure that no air can get in there. You tape the tops of your skimmers so no air can get in there, and then you turn that vacuum on and it'll suck that liner to the pool. Again, if it's sunny out, you want that sun to be out so that it loosens that liner and everything goes where it's supposed to be. So we got the hose going on it for about 3-4 hours, so I had about 3 feet of water in the deep end. And then one thing you have to do, you can't get away from this, you have to call in a water truck, because you have to get at least enough water to cover 3 inches of the shallow end. If you don't, and you get a rain and there's not enough pressure pushing down on that shallow end, water will come up from out of the ground and your liner will float, and you could end up having to pump all your water out of your pool again and reinstalling your liner. And once the truck shows up with the water, you're paying for it. The driver for the truck, the guy that showed up and put 8,000 gallons in my pool, he told me there's several horror stories of people that put in their liners, didn't have it right where it needed to be, started hitting it with the water, and then the liner started popping out, and tough luck. You still got to pay for the water, and then they had to pump it all out and then call the water truck back again. But you have to get that initial 8,000 or so gallons. You have to get enough water in that pool to put at least 3 inches in the lower end. And the other thing you don't want to do is, if you're doing it like I am in May, and if it gets cool at night like it is this time of year, you don't fill it up when there's no sun on the liner, because it's still not loose in the corners and you've got cold water in there. So I've had to shut off the hose here and stop filling it up to wait for another sunny day, and then I can fill up the rest of it and I'll hit it with the hose again. So there's everything that I learned. I hope it helps you out. I know we're happy. There you go. There's my story.